All right, guys. Welcome to the main podcast today, Opinionated Collective. Each week, each time we come on, we're going to be presenting a different topic. The last two podcast episodes that we did was called Pick Your Brains with Benjamin. Pick Your Brains with Benjamin is what I like to call an episode topic, and is basically sitting down with a content creator or a business person, kind of getting to know them, and then eventually migrate them on to the main podcast right here with us as a guest. So the Opinionated Collective is basically going to be as follows. It's going to be about four people from four different backgrounds, professionally, and of course, from life. And we're going to talk about different topics, trending topics. There'll be two things that Elizabeth and I will frequently discuss on this show. I will be talking about experiences from the life of someone diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder or the old Asperger's syndrome, and then ADHD. Elizabeth is going to be discussing. Elizabeth, what will you be discussing?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say welcome everyone to the show, and I'll be a guest host every so often, and my topic will center mainly around, only because it's a main interest, gender issues, but I can lend some experience to the discussion every so often, so because there'll be a variety of topics. So yes, I look forward to discussing.
And Justin, what are you going to bring us on the show?
Oh, so y'all will be in for an excellent treat, as I will be talking about issues regarding economics and markets, along with education. And chiefly my role, apart from those topics, would be administering the technology aspect of the podcast. So
Which
you're in
is
for great treats.
And you're also going to bring us from how the corporation sees it, as I think all three of us would definitely agree. We view how business works a lot differently than the common person.
That is correct.
Especially because we definitely all at this point where we all are, we kind of unfortunately understand how things are versus the fantasy of things, which is what social media and a lot of people like to try to sell you, which is, corporations are great. These are the best jobs to have. Yay, family. Me, I'm just like, can I show up for the check?
Exactly. It's just because they have a big name, right? All the corporations, the big name ones, everybody wants to get in because supposed prestige or whatever it is, but it doesn't always mean that it's that great a place to work at.
Oh, of course not.
Yeah.
So today's episode for the Opinionated Collective, we're going to be talking about our relationships up to this point, our friendships. You're going to get to know a little bit about all of us, where we came from, and what and what kind of expertise each of us has. So I'm going to introduce myself, and then we're going to go around the horn, basically, as they like to say, which was one of my favorite television shows, back on, ESPN back in the 2000s. So here's a little bit about me. So my name is Benjamin. Instead of giving you my age, I'm basically going to tell you I work in the healthcare sector right now, and I graduated college over a 9-year period. It took a lot longer than I had hoped, but at the very minimum, I was able to acquire 2 degrees, a lot of working experience and knowledge. I went to high school in Westchester County, New York, and my school district was the Toronto Louisboro School District. The high school I finished out that education with was John Jay. At very early age 4, I was diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder and ADHD. It took me a long time to be able to kind of, what's the word? To be able to just, watching your parents divorce from a very young age wasn't easy. We're going to touch on this later on, but later on in the episode today in a different, in a different discussion. But basically, the most important thing that you need to know about me is I've worked in different customer service and retail settings for the last, let's just say, better part of 16 years. And I gained an understanding of, what business really is as opposed to what I thought it was when I was going to college. Now I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth.
Hi there. Like I said earlier, my name's Elizabeth. And basically, I've been studying for the last few years social work because after exploring my interests and figuring that I really love to work with people, so I've centered on social service work. It's been very good so far. So I'm hoping to use what I learned and take that to, out into the real working world, and maybe I can implement some suggestions for changes for things that I see, because there's a lot of talk about advocacy and maybe some services that are lacking for some groups, so that I would like to explore further. I also like writing, so through my writing I'd also like to do some more research, again, especially on men's issues, because there's not a lot of resources out there. Even my social work classes, it's never talked about. I'm like the lone um, voice, saying, what about men? I always found myself asking that. And it's not easy when yours is pretty much the only opinion that is different from the narrative on gender issues.
So before we hand it off to Justin, there's one thing I wanted to say about that, as you mentioned. What you just said is basically, I think, a huge problem we're having in society today. And you know what that big problem is? It's all about me, 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 me. We're going to touch on this when we go into later topics that revolve around gender. But basically, I think the biggest issue we're having in the West right now is, if you're the only voice for men in the room, that just means, do I sit here and say, I think feminism has gone to mutational, all about women form, or where can we have a safe space for men to be able to discuss things? Because honestly, I know this is going to be a little far out there. I'm sure Justin and Aaron would both agree with me, but men have feelings too. We're not just here to be an ATM machine for everything.
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to also lead into dating, which we'll talk about, I believe, next week. And
That'll be fun.
The whole modern woman.
Yes.
Justin, let's hand it off to you.
Okay. So as I made my quick introduction before, my name is Justin, and I currently live in Florida, as known as the United States of Florida. I grew up in Solon, Ohio. I was born in Cleveland. I went to high school in Solon. Later, I went to University of Toledo for my first bachelor's. It took me a while. Then I moved to Michigan, did a master's degree. But when I was in Toledo and after I graduated, I looked for a job, did not find one. Then again, it was 2008, financial collapse, housing collapse. And so I just went along doing odd jobs, but eventually I moved into tech and I took some classes, got a job right away, went back and forth, classes, job, and now I am studying for my computer science degree at the University of Florida through the UF online program.
One thing I would say about that the fact of the matter is we're going to touch on this, but you're continuing to go forward in something with that early tech experience, going for a computer science degree, which is actually something to very much applaud in this day and age, because everyone's like, oh, no, I'm tired of school. I need to get out of school and go work. Let's be honest about something. We all know there's going to be a period where we're going to have, X, Y, and Z skills. So you might as well do it now.
That's true. As I don't know if anybody realizes this, but we live in a era of hyper-credentialization, especially in the United States. And I think a lot of people have missed that boat or missing that boat because they view the world as, or I should say, they view college, let alone university, as a one-time deal. And it really is not. And so we need to actively consider reviewing our view of what is university, what is college, why does college exist. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't alternatives out there. There are plenty of alternatives, and there are a lot of good ones. This is that because of these alternatives, universities and colleges are starting to realize, hey, we need to offer boot camps. We need to offer short-term courses. We need to lower our costs. So I think now is the time to start thinking about upskilling.
And that's one of the biggest things that a lot of people are having a difficult time understanding today. So now that we've done at least our introductions, I think what we're going to go into a segment. And this segment is basically what we touched on in our introductions, but now we can elaborate a little more. I'm going to start with me. So at age 4, and I've discussed this before, not just on LinkedIn, but I know you recall I used to make those posts on Facebook about it, before Facebook got rebranded as Meta.
Yeah.
The Meta company.
Nobody says that, right? Or do they? I don't know.
I don't even. All it is basically Facebook, but that's another topic. Anyway, at age 4, I was diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder, or what we used to call ADHD, but they decided to change the name because because everybody's a sensitive snowflake. I don't know what else to say at this point. So I'll just say they felt like the name should be more politically correct. Whatever you call it is whatever you call it. What I call autistic spectrum disorder is nothing more than a developmental learning disability, and hence the word developmental learning. An individualized education plan is really nothing more than just saying, look, I might need you to explain whatever work task this is a second time, or can I have a notepad with me to be able to take notes with what I'm doing? That's all a developmental learning disability really is. When you're in a school setting, all that really just says is, do I need another location for my exam? I can get a proctor. That's all the IEP and autism really is. My biggest problem with explaining this is as follows, and I'm pretty sure social workers will back me up on this. Putting handicap or actual disabilities in with the developmental disabilities was just not a good idea, period. And they're different. You can't make this one size fits all. Each disability is different. Each way a person learns is different. Someone might be a better visual learner. Someone might be a better hands-on learner. Everyone has a unique learning style. That's what I'm going to say for that. What complicated my life situation was divorce at 5 years old. And I'm sure when I hand it off to Justin will be able to elaborate on exactly how difficult a divorce really is. Because honestly, if you think it's bad for a 5-year-old, wait till you hear from somebody when he was 18 years old, going into early stage adulthood. They're just both bad, period. So after that, being diagnosed at 5, let's just say from kindergarten to literally senior year, the hardest thing for me in my life was mom and dad were literally just never able to come into the middle, and they really should have, set aside their differences and done what was best for their son. My dad went into a second marriage. That didn't work out. I have a brother and sister who I do care about, but we don't really have, we talk here and there. So, for me, people who I consider, like brother and sister at this point, it's literally become friends over the years who probably understand me better than some of my own family. Now I'll hand it over to Elizabeth.
Thank you, Ben. And I just want to say, to be honest, I don't really have a whole lot to elaborate on. Just, I guess the most difficult thing is just, like I had mentioned before, is like the relationship between my sister and I, my older sister. So she kind of was away from the family sort of thing. She didn't feel close to us, but I always wanted to get close to her, So it's only now in later years, I think we're trying to, you know, bring our relationship closer. And I did see her at Christmas time. And so she was very excited to see me, because before that it was such a long time. So I think now we're going to just try to get closer and just build that sisterly bond, as they say. So yeah, looking forward to that.
You don't have to worry about elaboration on it, especially with family. We're not all meant to understand what our family is going through, and I think that's sometimes where friends come in handy, is because sometimes honestly the friends are the better people that we can share things with,
because they're outside of the issue or
yeah.
situation.
I think it's because more, depending on what relationship you would even have with a brother or sister, you're talking to someone else who might better be able to listen with a different pair of ears. Justin, let's hand it off to you.
Thanks, Ben. And as Ben mentioned just moments ago, I divorced later in my young adult life. My parents divorced is either 16 or 17 years of age, and I was in high school. So by that time, I'm already being prepared to go into adulthood, only preparing to go to college, and before you know it, my family, from my perspective, is essentially disintegrated. And everything that I knew about family changed fundamentally overnight. And because everything's changed overnight, it seems like I now am thrust into a world where you really do have two separate people with two separate priorities and agendas trying that aren't aligned anymore. And that is what ended up being happens. People have different feelings for one another at each other's lives. And so it seems like one day, was really a combination of a lot of different things. And regardless of the reasons, having your family disintegrate is damaging. And to top it off, my brother, 2 years later, became deceased. So for me, right before I'm graduate from high school, I was a mess. I mean, I'm like, wait, my family just disappeared out of nowhere. What happened? So thoughts start to come your way. Why you and not your brother? Why is your family gone? So that is what makes that I guess just to end things off is that shapes you. As to this day, I have relationship issues. Not because, oh, it's women, oh, it's men. It's both. It's both. I don't know who to trust. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. Doesn't matter whoever. I scrutinize everything because of what happened all those years ago.
And that's the one thing that I alluded to, is the fact that if I had it bad at 5 years old, you at 18 years old, going from literally senior year of high school right into college, that can literally screw somebody up probably for a much longer period of time. For sure, that can definitely lead to a lot of trust issues by seeing your entire family break up.
Yeah.
I can only imagine, if it was bad for me, how bad it was for you.
I mean, I
And
coped. I mean, I ran away to college. I was free. I did whatever I could to not give a rat's. I mean, I did school. I
but
did
you were
band. I did.
probably still hurting very
I
much
was
on the
hurt very
inside,
much.
and either you one hid it, or two, it was noticeable. Do you remember which one it was?
I mean, I mean, I don't even remember. But it's either
It's
way.
if you don't worry about it. But it's part of this conversation was just to say, I'm sure people noticed it. Look, it was pointed out to me at one point, going through life by a particular person, and that I know that I'm angry when that's not the case. It's, you don't really understand what being hurt is. And everyone, unfortunately, whether you're a neurotype or an autistic, or even a woman, is going to process this a lot differently than
Mhm.
someone who doesn't really understand what being hurt is.
Oh, yeah.
That's the biggest thing that I would be telling someone who maybe doesn't understand from my perspective or your perspective. You need to experience it before
Yeah.
you start commenting.
Exactly.
So
People have no idea. I mean, they don't
no,
understand
they
the trauma.
really
And
don't.
if they
And
think
trying
trauma
to
is,
educate.
no, they don't know.
And that's one of the reasons why divorce is divorce. You can't, you can't say one person is more understanding than the other
No, you
person
can't.
on it.
Mm-mm. No,
And
you
Justin,
really
I just
can't.
want to ask. Oh, sorry, Ben.
Keep going.
Did you get counseling? Were you able to talk to anyone during
Me,
that time?
from a
Actually, Justin
young
as well. Yeah.
age, counseling was, some were good, some were so. It did help to have that extra person to talk to, but kind of the social workers were a little more handy much later on in life.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Did you say that to Justin? Same.
Yeah, so I did get counseling. It was quite helpful. I had a good time. I mean, I say if you can get counseling, especially if it's free, take it. Um, because it doesn't matter what the situation is, that person needs to be talked to and understood and have their feelings validated. And earlier the better, because honestly, I mean, I could have wound up a totally different person. And that's what people don't understand is whether it's divorce or whose fault it is, it doesn't matter. That child that becomes an adult will carry that throughout adulthood. That model that was there is now no longer there. They are now having to actively rebuild that model, that model of family. Because at this point, it's like, what is family to them? If mom and dad are not together, and the brother's not around, or whatever the case may be. What is family? Who is family? How
All
does
right.
family work?
Yeah.
Family, I think, is different for everyone. So the next thing I want to move into would now be that we've discussed a little bit about our, our formative or earlier years. We're going to move into relationships and friendships, college to professional level. So in this segment, we're going to take what we just looked at, which is for somebody at 18 years old going from college to then the workforce and navigating that. For Elizabeth, it would probably be the same with her as well, and the same for me. So I'll start with me. Since I mentioned it at the start, which is college took me about 9.5 years, and a lot of that was because I was working low-wage retail jobs. What I learned in those professional environments was a lot of social skills, or at least how to be adaptive. But I also learned something that has followed me later on into what I now call kind of a corporate career, and even, the foundation of this. Really, it's customer service and and how you work with people. So among the most important things I learned, about relationships and friendships, especially in a professional sense, is they're there for a time. So it's while you work for the company. Some people, you'll stay in contact with. Some people will become lifelong friends from work. Other people, you'll end up checking in here and there. But once you leave that place of work, they are what they are. They're just somebody that, you worked with at the time where, hey, I kept their number, but I don't know if that number stays the same. You get busy, that's life. Now, for you, Justin, let's ask that question. How do you think your relationships in college and the workforce, brought you to where you are?
Okay, well, in college, friendships were based on courses you took and whether or not you hit it off with your friends and activities. So for me, I made friends earlier on in college. I remember making friends in my English class that became university up until I more or less graduated. And then there are other friends that came in and out here and there. And and then I had friends when I was in the band and we bonded and did a lot of activities. And so that was really wonderful. Um, I did make, I guess you could say I made contacts with my professors. There are a couple of professors I made some contacts with, and they were very helpful in shaping me of my view of the world, especially um, Michael Dowd, professor of economics at the University of Toledo. Excellent professor, and helped me learn economics from a realistic perspective. Now, once I went out into the workforce, or I should say, after my master's degree, was I took that prior to really working. Because during the financial crisis, it was economics. It was those lessons that I was taught at university that kind of pulled me through. And later on, when I started the business, it was same thing. Except now I'm dealing with people, making relationships with people, and making sure that they're okay and they get their products and their services. And ultimately, later on, I learned to, and back in at University there, I learned to dance. So that's where I learned my social skills. And then when I went to University of Michigan and became director of curriculum over there, after being on their team for forever and a day, I learned how to handle elites and people of influence and all that. So ultimately, that's all led up to where I am today. That is why I'm able to deal with a variety of people from a variety of positions. And that is
You
why I'm able to.
mentioned you mentioned one important thing there. Dancing and some other outside activities for me also helped me gain a little more of an acceptance over the fact that things in my life have not turned out the way I wanted them to.
Sounds about
A
right.
good, perfect example of that was not being able to get your first full-time job until June 2021 with God knows how many frigging setbacks, over a decade. And basically, had it not been for the leeway into dance in those harder years from like 2013 when I moved to DC and then came back
Oh, hey.
following year in
Hey guys, hold on 1 second. I
2014.
can't hear you.
Hey,
See if I have this
so
on
we're
mute.
going to, just so everyone knows, this is Aaron. I'm just going to finish my thought up and we're going to introduce him to the audience. So if it hadn't been for a combination of dancing and, accomplishing that, I think from 2014 to today, I would have had a lot harder time dealing with the fact that I wasn't in a happy stage of my life from 2014 till today. All right, guys, this is Aaron. So for anyone who doesn't know who Aaron is, Aaron and I go all the way back to high school. This is one of the few friendships that has stayed with me almost all these years. He's a very dear friend, and I'm glad that he's part of our Opinionated Collective podcast. So Aaron, why don't you tell the audience, a little bit of your life story?
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. The headphones weren't working well. I don't know if you can hear the
I can
kids
hear
watching
you through my
a show in the
headphones,
background as
so
well.
if you can't use your headphones, and don't worry about the kids. We experienced this with.
All right. Let me try these one more time, and then we can always cut this out. So let me just try this one more time real quick. I think I have to.
Although we can hear you, or I can hear you.
I want to just be able to hear you guys better. I know it'll be
Can you
better
hear
if
us?
I have a headphone. I think I just have to go to a setting here. Is that right, Justin?
Yes. Is it connected via Bluetooth?
We're in the Zoom. Let's see. Sorry, guys.
Oh, that's
No
no
worries.
worries.
No, it's okay. This is gonna get cut out anyway.
Yeah, I know. I'm just sorry that you have to wait. You waited for me, or you're waiting for me now.
It's all right.
All right. Once we get the headphones, then we'll jump back in.
All right.
Let me see. I think if I go to
Justin,
the
pause it
settings
for
on
a
the Zoom,
second.
Justin. The best.
Huh?
All right. You want to?
All right,
just
guys. Opinionated.
Take it back.
We're gonna welcome Aaron now. Aaron is our executive producer on the show, executive producer and director on the show. He went to high school with me. We've known each other for, how long would you say we've known one another?
Oh, let's say since we were let's say at least 15 years. No, longer than that.
I was a freshman, you were a sophomore. No, I was a sophomore, you were a junior. Yeah, about 15, 16 years. It's been that long.
16 years, yeah. Let's
Anyway.
not age us. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. So tell us about some of your life story and how you got to where you were today.
Sure. So yeah, let's take it from when Ben and I became friends in high school. I was super into sports and jock stuff at the time. Then went into college kind of unknowing or not really knowing what I wanted to do with my life. I knew that I liked sports. I knew that was kind of where my interest lied, and I studied sports management at Ithaca College. And I always kind of knew that I had a passion for acting. I would always do impressions and voices. But that was always my sister's thing. She was always the performer of the family. But I think a little bit of it seeped into me. And so when I studied abroad in Australia. And I had a friend of mine, Sam Dugmore, who was studying acting. And he just seemed like he was so carefree and loved what he was doing. And I was like, you can do this for a living? And he was like, yeah, that's my plan. So that's kind of where my whole shift into media and entertainment happened. From there, I came back to Ithaca College for my senior year, and I studied acting, just kind of sitting in on classes, not even really being graded for it, just because I knew that's what I wanted to do with my life. And then after I graduated, took a bunch of different classes in New York and the city, and started pursuing an acting career. And, you know, after years and years of doing it, I realized, you know what, like, let me try and just make my own content. Let me, you know, I had always edited like skate videos when I was, you know, skating back as a kid and snowboarding. And I'm like, you know, I've done it before. I've edited, I've shot stuff. So why don't I just start wearing these hats as well? And I wrote a short film that actually got into Cannes Film Festival. And, you know, then I realized, you know, I could do this for real. And, you know, I still have a love for acting, and I still want to pursue that part of the craft. That never died, you know, but it definitely sat on the back burner as I tried to make money for a family of 4 now. So I have 2 daughters and my wife, Nicole. And so we're living out here in Los Angeles, and that's kind of my story.
So you just hit something, because I think we took an editing class together in high school too. And that was something that,
Yeah.
to this day, I finally decided when I met Elizabeth last year on LinkedIn, the story, I just finally said to myself, one side story. Back in 2016, Aaron and I made a couple videos together, and he saw back then what he's seeing today. But the only difference is when I just finally decided to say last year, you know what, screw it. Time to start doing something for myself. And after interacting with different people on LinkedIn, I finally realized I can make some changes in my life. One of the things that I want to say to our audience, especially today, when the pandemic started back in 2020, what brought the 4 of us together, I think, is the fact on something that he's talking about. And this is going to be a theme throughout the Opinionated Collective and Pick Your Brains with Benjamin, you know, episodes, which is the theme of entrepreneurship, the theme of, it's not just about making money, but what the real reason we all decided to do this together is freedom. That's the biggest, most empowering reason people go to entrepreneurship, is they want to get years of their life back in freedom. Money is always, you know, part of it, but the idea that you can be free today in the digital age, you know, with remote working, now you can create your own legacy with entrepreneurship.
Totally. 100%.
That
was a big impetus for, you know, trying to do my own thing too. It was just, I kind of,
we were all getting tired of what's called the rat race.
Yeah. I mean,
I never really entered that race. In fact, that's the thing. What happened to me is I graduated from University of Toledo in 2007, and I graduated with a BS in pharmaceutical sciences degree. And oh, guess what? No job for you. So
I was still in college in 2007 at Westchester Community College, and guess what happened the following year? The market crashed.
Yep.
Yes, sometimes you can't always, get in to what you set out. You know, circumstances
I couldn't
happen.
get in. And the crazy part is this. I even had interviewers who told me there's no job for you.
So now that you just touched on that, the last topic we're going to discuss today as a group, and I'm sure, which is the reason we all went into entrepreneurship, that was the leeway. We're going to discuss what it was like working for different companies and why we chose this together, the 4 of us, in the first place. So the last segment we're going to do, and I'm glad Aaron got here for this, is basically workplace dynamic and toxic relationships. This is going to toxic relationships in personal and at work. This is the juiciest, best part of the show that I'm sure everyone wanted to hear today. So basically, I'm going to start out with a minor segment, and then we're going to have the full discussion, which is basically my biggest reason for going into entrepreneurship besides freedom is I've worked in retail for so long, and this is my first job working in a medical group. I enjoy it, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of things that I've noticed that followed over from retail. For example, management not always knowing what they're doing. The people who usually got promoted, or what I call a slacker Harry or a slacker Steve, are not cut out for management, and there's a lot of politics in the workplace. So for anyone who doesn't know, a slacker Steve is basically what we really call a slacker Chad or a slacker Harry. It's basically that person in high school who's completely immature that never leaves that mentality. And when he goes into the workplace, he just winds up being promoted because he looks like he knows what he's doing. Everybody's had this type of person in their lives. Now, the reason I leewayed into entrepreneurship right now is mainly because of the fact that with autism, I don't always feel employers really fully understand how to utilize, people on the autistic spectrum unless their relative is one, or unless they've worked with them before in certain settings. So the big reason for this podcast with me also is to start helping people really understand through myself, how do you work with somebody who's autistic, and how do you understand somebody who's autistic? When you understand high function versus low function, you will understand how to work with us. High function is basically me. So now, Elizabeth, tell us about some of your workplace experiences.
Oh, well, after high school, I just kind of went from doing different jobs, just because I had to pay the bills. So for a while, it was call center, and then it's been pretty much office until the last one I had, before I got the nonprofit agency, it was contracts. I was there 3 months, but just before that one, it was the real estate office, and that was the one that it really
left you
got
with
me.
a dislike for corporations, correct?
That's right. That's right. In fact,
I can only imagine, because we all know if it wasn't the slacker Steve that was your problem, it was probably the high up people who just didn't know what the hell they were doing.
Well, they were all right, but the thing is, okay, first of all, it was a family-owned style company, so I was the receptionist. And when you're like receptionist or admin, it's like you're the one that does all the stuff nobody else wants to do.
Mhm.
You're the one that people talk condescending to, and there was what made it particularly difficult is I worked with the administrator, and she took a dislike to me from the beginning, and it never went well, and so it made the environment toxic. And I thought, you know what, I want to try my own thing now. After going from like job to job, and you're kind of pushed around. You're told what to do, when to do it. As you get older, you want something more meaningful in your life. You want more autonomy, and so that's when I really started to hone in on what I really wanted to do. And then that led to the idea of, I'd like to try something. I wasn't sure yet what. I was still exploring ideas, but I'd really like to do something. So, and also my experience of workplace bullying there. So that I thought, no, it's time to try a different direction. It's time to do something else. Yeah,
I learned a lesson, guys, and I'll say one thing when it comes to workplace bullying, and I realize this now while working in a doctor's office. Workplace bullying was usually because certain people were just frustrated with their days and they were in management positions that really were in over their head. So if
Yeah.
they have if they can't communicate with people that they don't know what they're doing, they're just going to bully the person.
Yeah.
Aaron,
Yeah.
let's ask you, what were your workplaces like before you started to kind of freelance?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Oh,
let's see. That's a
which
good.
one? Which one are you talking to?
Aaron, and then just
All right. Let's see. Man, I'm trying to think back to like where. Well, let's say okay. So I worked in restaurants a lot.
I
kind of
do remember
after
that.
college. Yeah, I worked in a couple different restaurants, and let's see, was there workplace bullying in the restaurant? I don't know if there was as much
You
bullying,
did.
but you
I
definitely felt
definitely
from
know you dealt with difficult customers, especially because it's the restaurant.
certainly. Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, there was I worked in Manhattan at upscale dining restaurant on Fifth Avenue, and I mean, you literally saw it all. I mean, from like the hoity-toity Upper West Side grandmother to no joke that we would have royalty. So Saudi royalty would come to the restaurant because it was a Lebanese place and they had really good food. So
Mm.
there were literally points in time where like super high up prince of Saudi Arabia would come in with just tons of like, assistants.
Government personnel.
Yeah, I mean, they would come in like 15, 20 deep. And I know it's kind of getting off topic of the workplace bullying, but they would have such an their idea of opulence and like showing their wealth would be to order as much as possible. So they would have just tables full of food and like eat 1/15 of the food that was on their table, and then just say, okay, we're done, get rid of it.
That
So that was interesting.
I don't know what to say to that because I was going to say something snarky, but I'll just say that's incredibly wasteful spending.
Oh, I mean, without question, and it's in their culture, to show that they have a lot of money, and that's how they do it.
We know that.
A lot of people.
The restaurant business was interesting, but I feel like the restaurant industry is much different than other industries just because of the fact that it's people from all walks of life.
Oh,
you
yes.
don't have a typical culture. I mean, there are people who are studying psychology and actors and filmmakers and
the random college kid who needs some extra money because he's between semesters.
Exactly.
I mean,
so there was really a great diversity. And then especially in the kitchen. That's kind
of what retail for me was in a nutshell. I mean, you had one thing I'm just going to say quickly for our audience. Retail taught me a lot of things. The one thing that retail really, really taught me is that there's a time in our lives where the retail sector fits and where it doesn't. When you start to get into your 30s, you don't want to be in retail anymore. So, Justin, let's hit. You will definitely have at least one or two interesting stories to tell us.
Oh, yes, I will. So just a quick background. So pre-tech and post-tech. So pre-tech, after university, I worked at a bookstore in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And it was nice. I mean, no issues. I mean, Ann Arbor is one of the most liberal, accepting places you can work and be at. I also worked randomly as a tax preparer at a Walmart. I had some customers that weren't happy, let's just say, and I had to fix my colleagues' mistakes and whatnot. That didn't last long. They shut us down. So, and overall, I had a business, which was great. And I also worked at a furniture store as a web marketing associate. Not bad, good stuff. But then I moved to Cleveland and I worked at a nonprofit. And during this nonprofit, there was so much toxicity. Right? There's old relationships, difficult people, and there's overall, I wasn't really all that comfortable being there. I felt like I didn't really belong. But there were some people in management that were helpful, so it wasn't bad. Then, then I moved to Detroit, and after taking a coding camp and all these applications, I finally hit up a job at, at a company in Atlanta. And I was so excited because they wanted me for 2 years. Well, guess how it turned out?
Hmm.
It turned out
Not
to be
so
a
good, especially
it
because
turned out to
we
be
were
a freak show.
texting about that.
Oh yes,
We were,
it turned out to be an absolute freak show. Now, I'm
so
not
I'm just
saying
gonna
they
give
didn't do well.
I'm gonna give a quick little backstory and then let you finish.
Okay.
Justin and I have been talking now since 2018. And during that entire time, he used to tell me some interesting stories about this place. And I would literally just sit there and cringe. I would just sit there and cringe at the amount of toxicity that was going on in your life at that time. And you were like, oh.
Yeah.
Yep.
So on the outside, it looked pretty glamorous because I got flown in to Atlanta. They put me up in a this big yellow house, and then they trained me, and then they sent me on a project in North Carolina. But the deal is that every day it was like, are you
Something.
going to survive? And are you gonna get kicked out of the house if you don't make it through the week? And then what was crazy is they didn't really tell you the fact that, hey, yeah, we kind of redid your resume for you, and it's all over the internet. And now you're interviewing,
Hmm.
and it's not exactly kosher, as they say. Well, I went through the process, because guess what? You sign the contract. If you break contract, you owe a bunch of money. Oh, wonderful. And I got the contract. I went through it. And actually the place where I worked at was fantastic. I had a great time, great people, great everything, except for this one person
The
who could not be.
manager.
Nah,
Hmm.
it's not. Nah, I wouldn't consider him a manager because he didn't even work for the company. He worked at the company just like I did. But somehow he is more or less my boss. He terrorized the entire Android team. We're all just contractors. But he thought we were supposed to be this massive, awesome thing. We're doing our best. But he can never be satisfied.
Oh, God.
I made the
Hmm.
mistake of satisfying him early on, and then I end up being on his bad side because things happen. This is development. It's Android. It's messy. Things happen, and I eventually got let go because of this guy. Basically,
Well,
he's the
I will
linchpin
say
that
this.
undid something magnificent. And
You are
so
in a
to
better
this day,
place now. So you are in a better place now.
I am. But here's the deal, though. It ended up being that my mind has changed. I've been reformed. I'm tougher now. I give no cares anymore.
In terms of
And
jobs.
I'm
Yeah.
definitely more ruthless now. Let's just say that.
and that's a good thing. So now that we've all learned from one another today, and hopefully the audience has learned something as well, what I'm going to finish the episode today and say is this: as we go through each episode, we're all going to explore different topics, throughout this series. You're going to get four different unique perspectives on things. There's going to be funny jokes and, just funny stuff in along the way. That'll make the hardest topics even, easier to understand. So I'm going to end by saying today, I hope you guys all learned something from us today, and we're going to be your hosts going forward. We'll see you at the next one. All right, guys? Done.